HTML5 is often talked about as the shape of things to come, the future of the web, the nemesis of the native application, and potentially even a solution to the mobile platform fragmentation that results from different operating systems. But exactly what is it? And what does it mean to the mobile industry? My name's Mark Bridge. In this special report for thephonecast.com, I'm talking to Bruce Lawson, who works for browser company Opera and who co-authored the book introducing HTML5. So Bruce, I know HTML as the language of web pages. What's HTML5?
HTML5 is a way of extending HTML, which was first written for document-centered web pages, in order to allow it to have features that we would now call applications, so more interactivity, etc. So it supersets HTML4 and gives more stuff for supporting apps. So
in simple terms, it's the fifth version of HTML?
In simple terms and in entirely accurate terms, yes, it's the fifth iteration of the HTML language, but it was developed specifically to extend HTML to compete with Flash and Silverlight.
There's been a lot of talk as well of HTML5 and its relationship with mobile devices. How does HTML5 fit with mobile?
HTML5 fits very well with mobile because when we started in 2004, we wrote a design principles document against which every feature is tested, and one of those design principles is that it must work across every device. So it's not specifically for mobile, but it has to work on mobile. Other design principles, it must be capable of being internationalized so that people who don't use Latin scripts can make web pages. It has to be accessible to people with disabilities, for example. And when you're comparing different features to the other ones, or different mechanisms of making a new feature, the easier way for developers is favoured, even if it might be harder to write the specification. It's designed to make developing applications as easy as possible for developers.
So does HTML5 effectively mean the end of the native app?
I'd like to think so. Personally, I consider apps to be a bridging technology, much as Flash was a bridging technology. When HTML wasn't capable of application-like behavior, Flash stepped in and it allowed developers to make good stuff, which we in the HTML community got scared of. So upped our game. There are things that you can do on native that you can't do in HTML, and we are hard at work at closing that gap at the moment.
What kind of adoption of HTML5 is there at the moment?
That's a hard question to answer because here's a secret for your listeners. If your boss or your client says, I want an HTML5 website, you can change one line of your code, the doc type at the top, and make an HTML5 doc type, and all of your code is magically HTML5 because HTML5 supersets what you had before. But we're seeing huge uptake on HTML5 video, HTML5 forms, which are about forms that validate in the browser without extra scripting. A lot of the features like storing information in the browser, web sockets for opening a communication line between the client and the server so that you can do chat and things like that without all the extra overhead that HTML4 gives you. I can't tell you a percentage of the top 10,000 sites, but I believe it's pretty high, in the tens of percents. Considering it's a language that's not finished yet, that's pretty good.
You describe it as not finished yet. Does that mean it's not ready for public consumption?
I'm an English literature graduate, and so the metaphor I always use is the English language isn't finished yet. We're always inventing new words, and words are constantly shifting in meaning. But nobody would say that English isn't ready to speak yet. HTML5 is the web, and so some bits of it have been solid and usable since 2005. Some bits of it have been solid since 1998 because we retrospectively standardized some things that were in all browsers but were never written down. Some cutting edge stuff isn't quite finished yet, but I would imagine that a fraction of a tenth of a percent of people actually are using that cutting edge stuff now.
And if that cutting edge stuff isn't available yet, what do people do instead?
Well, they start coding a native app and they find by the time their native app goes into production, it's already been added to the language and they should have waited.
What do you think the barriers are then to HTML5 adoption?
The barriers are that a lot of businesses think in terms of devices rather than the web. So people say, I want an iPhone app, when actually if they said, I want a website that works on an iPhone, they would get a website that works on an iPhone and Android and Opera and Windows and BlackBerry. But developers maybe aren't adept at managing the expectations of their clients or their bosses. Another significant barrier is monetization. The web has great reach. If you're making a website that has to reach everybody, the web is your man. If you are looking to make your million through an app, it's much harder to monetize a website than it is to put it in an app store and get your 70% of the money you're given. That's the barrier, and it's one we're actively looking at closing now.
Something that mobile devices have historically had a problem with when it comes to development, not just of websites but also of apps, are the different screen sizes. How's that handled in HTML5?
We'll call it HTML5 because it's the umbrella term that people use, but there's actually a companion language to HTML5 which is called CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. And for a long time, for many years, my boss has written a spec called Media Queries, and that allows a developer to reflow a page or to reformat a page depending upon the width of the screen. So that's a solved problem, except that if you wanted to radically move stuff about, like seriously reorder things, that wasn't possible until about 6 months ago, when then a new specification got added called Flexbox or Flexible Box. But that's now in IE 10 and 11, Firefox, Chrome, Opera and Safari, so that's a solved problem as well.
And finally, Bruce, what's your background? Why are you the go-to man for HTML5?
I'm one of the many go-to people about HTML5, but I just became aware that there was this new thing coming on the horizon in 2008. Tried to read the specifications, couldn't make head and a tail of them, so I decided to make my website HTML5 on the grounds that I learn by doing. And then it took me a month, and then I wrote it into a book so that other people wouldn't need to spend a month doing it. And I wrote the first book, or co-wrote the first book, called Introducing HTML5 for Developers. And since then, people like you have asked me questions, but there's many of us, there's many people from all browsers and all walks of life who you can ask about this stuff.
Bruce, thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Today's podcast has been produced as part of the Need to Know Mobile series, in partnership with the Mobile Academy, which is hosted by Mobile Monday London and UCL. For more details, search for the hashtag #NeedToKnowMobile. You'll find more podcasts from The Phonecast on our website at thephonecast.com. That's ThePhonecast, and they can also be downloaded through iTunes or Stitcher.com. My name's Mark Bridge. Thanks for listening.